Welcome back, folks. My name is Andrew Stephen. I'm 60 years old, and over the years, I've listened to countless stories, whispered in dimly lit bars, confessed in trembling voices, or passed down through families who wish they could forget. What I share with you is never fiction. These are the stories people lived, suffered, and in some cases never returned from. Tonight, we're diving into one of horror cinema's most unsettling films, Insidious, 2010. Many thought it was just another haunted house tale, with jump scares and demons in dark corners. But what if I told you that the events of Insidious are not only possible, but rooted in real practices and real tragedies? In the film, young Dalton Lambert falls into a coma, not from an illness, but because his soul wandered away from his body into a realm called the Further. His astral body slipped into a world filled with lost souls and malevolent spirits, all desperate to snatch his empty vessel. His father, Josh, must venture into that same dimension to save his son, only to bring back something much worse. Sounds like Hollywood fantasy, doesn't it? But here's the chilling truth. Astral projection, the ability for the soul to detach and travel, is not only a long-believed phenomenon, but one that governments, psychics, and ordinary people have claimed to practice for centuries. The concept of a silver cord tethering your spirit to your body is not an invention of filmmakers. It has been described in religious texts, ancient teachings, and personal accounts across the globe. The idea that one could slip into a dimension beyond ours, filled with entities both beautiful and monstrous, has haunted humankind for centuries. What makes Insidious so terrifying is not just the lipstick-faced demon grinning in the shadows. It's that the film portrays astral projection almost exactly as countless witnesses have described it. The Further isn't a made-up place. It's a mirror of what some have called the astral plane, a realm of the dead, a place where time folds in strange ways, where spirits linger, and where demons hunt. Even more disturbing is how astral projection moved from folklore into history books. During the Cold War, both the Soviet Union and the United States explored it as a possible weapon, believing spies could infiltrate enemy bases without ever leaving their own bodies. And beyond those secret experiments, ordinary people have claimed to astral project, sometimes returning with strange knowledge, sometimes not returning at all. So when James Wan directed Insidious, maybe he wasn't just writing fiction. Maybe he was drawing from the shadows of truth. Tonight, I'll tell you the story behind the film, and then I'll walk you through 5 of the strangest, most terrifying accounts of astral projection ever recorded. But I'll warn you, once you listen, you may never look at dreams the same way again. Now, before I share with you the strangest and most chilling stories of astral projection, let's pause and understand what it really is. Astral projection isn't just a dream. It isn't some fleeting image conjured up by an overworked imagination. It is described as an intentional out-of-body experience, where the soul detaches from the physical body and travels across unseen planes. Those who practice it claim they can see their own bodies lying motionless while they roam freely in a world both familiar and unearthly. This astral body, as it's called, is said to be connected to the physical form by a silvery cord. If this cord is severed, or if the astral traveler loses their way, well, that's when nightmares like Insidious become reality. Straight too far, and something else might crawl back into your abandoned shell. Across cultures, astral projection has different names. The ancient Egyptians spoke of the Ka, a spirit that could separate and wander. The Japanese warned that those who were sick or comatose were more prone to spiritual travel. In the West, mystics and occultists considered astral projection not only possible, but dangerous. And yet, despite the warnings, fascination only grew. By the 18th century, thinkers like Emanuel Swedenborg wrote detailed accounts of their own astral journeys. Swedenborg claimed he could visit distant cities and describe them in detail without ever leaving his chamber. Centuries later, in the 20th century, the practice became more than a mystical curiosity. It became a matter of national security. You see, during the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union poured resources into psychic research. The Soviets, in particular, were rumored to be training soldiers in parapsychology, telepathy, telekinesis, and yes, astral projection. They weren't doing this for fun. They wanted to weaponize it. Imagine it, a soldier who could leave his body, slip into enemy headquarters, and return with classified information. A spy who could walk through locked doors because he no longer had flesh. A ghost working for the KGB. The Americans caught wind of this research and quickly launched programs of their own. In 1974, the CIA tested a man named Patrick Price, a former police officer who claimed he could astral project into Soviet facilities. His reports were so detailed, down to floor plans and operations, that officials took notice. Whether you believe him or not, the documents of those experiments remain unclassified to this day. The Soviets, meanwhile, developed techniques they believed could capture the human aura on film. They studied bioplasma, convinced it was the very energy that connected the body and spirit. Some even feared astral projectors could be trained as assassins, slipping into rooms and inflicting harm on their enemies before vanishing into the ether. Think about that. Governments investing in the paranormal. Scientists trying to prove what mystics had whispered for centuries. And ordinary people, curious, reckless, or desperate, testing the boundaries of life and death in their own bedrooms. This is the world that birthed Insidious. And the chilling part? The film's depiction of souls wandering too far from their bodies, of demons eager to possess the empty shell, is not fantasy. It's testimony. In the next part, I'll begin sharing real stories, stories of people who dared to explore the astral plane and paid the price. If we're going to speak of astral projection and its dangers, we must begin with one of the most infamous cases in American history, Robert Antomovich. His name might not appear in textbooks, but among paranormal researchers, his story is whispered like a cautionary tale. Robert was no novice. He wasn't a teenager dabbling in seances or a curious dreamer playing with forces he didn't understand. He was a man who studied, who traveled, who sought deeper knowledge of life beyond the veil. In the early 1970s, Robert visited India, where a yogi introduced him to astral projection. Unlike many who treat such practices as fleeting experiments, Robert devoted himself entirely to the craft. But it wasn't just discipline that drew him deeper. It was a voice. He began to have dreams of a woman. She was unlike any he had ever seen, exotic, beautiful, with eyes that seemed to burn with both kindness and cruelty. Her voice called to him in the silence of night, beckoning him further, promising him knowledge, even love, beyond this mortal realm. Robert told his friends and his roommate about these visions, but they dismissed them as dreams. On 1st June 1975, Robert prepared himself. He locked his bedroom door and told his roommate under no circumstances was he to be disturbed. For 3 days, silence hung in that apartment. His roommate grew uneasy, then terrified. Finally, on the 3rd day, he broke down the door. Robert was dead. He lay on his bed, smiling faintly as though he had seen something wonderful just before his heart gave out. There were no signs of struggle, no indication of illness.
The doctors who examined him were baffled. His body was healthy, his organs intact, yet life had left him. The newspapers reported a mysterious death. The coroner could not explain it, but among those who knew of Robert's interests, the answer seemed chillingly clear. He had gone too far. Some said he simply chose not to return. Others claimed that the woman in his visions was not a woman at all, but a demon.
Descriptions of her matched Amut, a figure from ancient Egyptian lore, half lion, half crocodile, half hippopotamus, a devourer of souls. To see her in the astral plane meant to lose yourself forever. If that was true, then Robert never stood a chance. His soul was consumed, leaving behind only an empty, smiling shell. The story spread quickly. Headlines branded his death as mysterious and unexplainable, but those in the occult community knew what had happened. Robert's fate became a warning. When you leave your body, not everything you meet in the further wishes you well. Some want you gone so they can stay. The case shook even seasoned practitioners. Some abandoned the practice altogether. Others, more reckless, were drawn to it, as if his death only proved that the astral world was real. But for Robert, there was no return, no second chance. His body remained here, but his spirit had vanished into the unseen. And the strangest part, weeks later, another death occurred, one that would only deepen the mystery. Not long after Robert Antoschik's death, another name emerged in whispers among paranormal circles, Laverne Landis. Her story is far less known in the mainstream, but in its way even more tragic. Laverne was a mother of 5, a nurse in Minnesota, and by all accounts a woman of kindness and responsibility. She was not someone one would expect to abandon her family and pursue something as dangerous as astral projection. But sometimes the lure of the other side comes not from curiosity, but from desperation, and from voices we cannot ignore. Laverne, too, began hearing a voice. It promised her power, the power to heal the sick. Imagine what such a promise might mean to a nurse, someone who had dedicated her life to easing the suffering of others. At first she dismissed it, but the voice grew stronger, more insistent. It seemed to call her not only in dreams, but while she was awake, whispering from shadows, echoing through empty hallways. Her friends in a local psychic group warned her. They said projection could be dangerous, that she might get stuck in limbo. They pleaded with her to resist. But like Robert, she was drawn in by something far stronger than caution, hope. Eventually, the voice told her to leave everything behind, and she obeyed. She quit her job, abandoned her 5 children, and set out on a journey with her boyfriend, traveling for 6 months, guided only by the unseen spirit that promised her miracles. Their wandering ended at Loon Lake, a lonely stretch of wilderness. The snow was deep, the air cutting cold, but Laverne insisted this was where they would arrive. Her words, according to her boyfriend, were chilling. "We've got to stay here. They're going to be in. I know it. I can feel it. They're almost here." The two of them camped there, waiting. Days passed. The cold tightened its grip. Laverne grew weaker, but her belief never faltered. She spoke constantly of the voice, of the power she would soon be given. But no one came. In the end, Laverne died in the snow, likely from starvation or hypothermia. Her boyfriend, barely clinging to life himself, crawled through the snow until he found help. But for Laverne, it was too late. When her body was discovered, investigators tried to make sense of her death. Some pointed to mental illness. Others suspected cult influence. She had reportedly been interested in UFO groups and fringe spiritual movements. But to those who knew her story, the explanation was far darker. She had been called by something in the astral plane, the same feminine voice that lured Robert, perhaps, the same entity known in Egyptian legend as Ammit. If that was true, then Laverne's fate was sealed long before she set foot in those woods. The tragedy is not just that she died, but that she left behind 5 children who never fully understood why her mother walked away. Did she believe she was making a sacrifice that would ultimately save others? Did she truly think she was chosen? Or was she simply another victim of a spirit hungry for souls? Whatever the answer, her story remains a chilling reminder: not all voices we hear are our own, and not all promises come from the light. And yet, her story is just one thread in this strange tapestry, because soon after, whispers emerged of something even stranger: an entire classroom that decided to test the boundaries of astral travel. If Robert Antastic and Laverne Landis were tragic individuals pulled into the abyss by voices, the next story is something far stranger and more unsettling. It wasn't just one person who experimented with astral travel. It was an entire group. In the late 1970s, at Seton High School in Cincinnati, Ohio, a class of seniors began dabbling in what they thought was harmless spiritual exploration. Like many teenagers, they were curious about the unknown, about ghosts, the afterlife, and powers beyond the physical world. Some of them had come across books on astral projection which promised that with enough practice they could leave their bodies at will. At first, it was just a hobby. They would lie down in the darkened classroom, guided by a sympathetic teacher who indulged their curiosity. They practiced breathing exercises, visualizations, and concentration drills. Some claimed to feel a strange vibration, a buzzing inside their skulls, or the sense that they were floating just a few inches above their bodies. Most wrote it off as imagination, but not all. One student in particular described seeing the entire classroom from the ceiling. Another said he floated through the hallway, past the lockers and into the gymnasium before snapping back into his body. The reports began piling up. What had started as an experiment was now feeling very real. And then something changed. Several students began to see a shadow figure during their sessions. At first, it was described as nothing more than a dark blur, watching from the edge of the classroom. But week after week, it drew closer. One girl described it as a woman in black robes, her face hidden, but her presence heavy and suffocating. The students grew frightened, but at the same time they were hooked. Fear and fascination tangled together, urging them to continue. The shadow woman began to appear even outside their sessions, standing at the back of the cafeteria, waiting at the far end of the football field, even sitting silently in the corner of bedrooms at night. Soon after, their teacher, who had first encouraged their exploration, fell ill. She developed persistent fevers, severe fatigue, and disturbing nightmares. She claimed to see the same woman reaching out for her with clawed hands. Her decline was so rapid and unexplainable that the students began to whisper that they had unleashed something none of them could control. And then came the most terrifying event of all. During one session, half the class claimed to leave their bodies simultaneously. They described floating high above the school, drifting into a vast gray void. But they weren't alone. The woman was there. This time, they saw her face, or at least what was left of it. Sunken, skeletal, with hollow black pits where her eyes should have been. They screamed themselves awake, collapsing back into their bodies in terror. Several of them refused to participate ever again. The teacher soon resigned, moving out of state without explanation. Today, some of those students are still alive. A few of them have spoken publicly, insisting what they saw was real. Others refuse to discuss it, saying only that they opened a door that should never be opened. If Robert's story was about power and Laverne's about faith, then the Seton High School student story is about curiosity and how it can draw entire groups into the same darkness. Not all stories of astral travel come from groups or reckless experiments. Some like the story of David Kay, are shrouded in mystery, leaving behind more questions than answers. David was a young man in his early 20s during the early 1980s, living in a small town in upstate New York. By all accounts, he was quiet, studious, and introverted. He lived with his parents, attended community college, and spent much of his time reading books about the paranormal, mysticism, and the occult. Unlike others who stumbled into astral projection, David sought it out deliberately. His journals, later found by his family, revealed his obsession with leaving the body. He documented nightly attempts, describing in precise detail the sensations of vibrations, the feeling of floating, and the sound of what he called the rushing wind. Over time, his writings grew darker. He claimed that he had succeeded in separating from his body, traveling through his home, and even standing over his parents while they slept. But then a new presence entered his accounts. David began writing about a guide who appeared during his travels. At first, he believed this figure to be a helper, a tall man in a dark coat who beckoned him further into the astral plane. The guide spoke little, but seemed to gesture toward vast, shadowy landscapes David could not resist exploring. For weeks, David described following this figure through endless voids, over silent seas, and across vast plains where nothing lived. But the tone of his journals shifted again. The guide's behavior changed. Instead of leading him to new places, the man in the coat began to circle David, always just out of reach. He never showed his face. Soon, David began complaining that he felt drained after each session. He would wake trembling, sweating, and exhausted as though he hadn't slept at all. His parents noticed his pallor and fatigue. He withdrew from his classes and spent more and more time in his room. One night, he told his mother something chilling. He said, "He wants me to stay there. He doesn't want me to come back." Weeks later, David Kay disappeared. His parents went to wake him in the morning, only to find his bed empty. His window was locked from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints, and no explanation. His journals ended abruptly with a final line. "Tonight, he says it's time." The police launched a search, combing the woods, rivers, and neighboring towns, but David Kay was never found. His case remains unsolved. Some paranormal researchers who have studied his writings believe David was lured away, his soul trapped in the astral world by whatever force he called the guide. Others insist he simply ran away, that his journals were the ravings of an unstable mind. But those who knew him best swore he wasn't delusional. They believed he left this world by unnatural means. Even now, some locals whisper that on still nights, if you walk near the old house where David once lived, you can hear the sound of rushing wind through the trees, like a door opening between worlds. As I sit back and recall these stories, the pride of Robert Antoschik, the faith of Laverne Landis, the reckless curiosity of the Seton High School students, and the disappearance of David Kay, I feel the same chill you may be feeling now. These are not simply ghost tales meant to entertain. They are accounts of people, ordinary men and women, who tampered with forces they could not fully understand. Astral projection, out-of-body travel, whatever name you give it, has always carried a dangerous allure. The idea of slipping free from flesh, of soaring where a body cannot, appeals to something deep within us. But in each story we've explored, that desire came with consequences. Robert, convinced of his strength, found only death. Laverne, seeking spiritual proof, fell into madness. The students of Seton High School, eager for adventure, were stalked by a woman who may never have been human. and David Kay, chasing knowledge, may have stepped beyond the point of return. Different lives, different choices, but a common thread runs through them. Each opened a door, and something was waiting on the other side. I have spoken with old men who swear they once floated above their childhood homes. I've listened to trembling voices describe hands reaching for them in the night, and always, always, there is a shadow. The unknown is not empty, it waits. So I ask you, if you were given the chance to step out of your body tonight, would you take it? Would you risk not finding your way back? Perhaps that is why so many of these stories end not with triumph, but with loss. Because astral travel, if it is real, is not a playground for human souls. It is a battlefield, and we are far too fragile to walk it unarmed. Tell me, friends, what do you believe? Are these tales warnings from the past, or simply stories carried by frightened minds? Have you, or someone you know, ever experienced the strange pull of leaving the body, dreams so vivid they felt more real than waking life? If you have your own encounter, whether it's with astral projection, shadows in the night, or something stranger still, I invite you to share it. Perhaps your story will become the next one I tell here. Reminders that we are never truly alone. So keep your doors locked, your lamps burning, and your prayers close at hand, for the night is long and the shadows are patient. And if you've made it this far, I thank you. Stay with us, stay close, and most of all, stay safe. Until next time, this has been Andrew Stephen, your old storyteller. Watch our videos and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of horror. And remember, if you have a story of your own, the world is waiting to hear it.